Every story has a sort of beginning somewhere in your mind, right? Whether it be a character or a setting or a plot line where you think about, oh, how could I invert this trope, right? That's one of my personal favorites. But you have something that you tend to think about initially, okay? And this tends to be the sort of spark that inspires you to actually want to create the story. Now, if someone was to ask me, how exactly should I go about actually committing to this story? I have this idea, or I want to make this character and I can see this scene playing out, but I just don't know how I'm actually going to put it on the page, or if you're doing like a comic or if you're doing a painting, whatever it is, you have a vision, an idea for something that you want to create, for a story that you want to tell, and you just are trying to figure out how do you get from the point of it being a concept, an idea, to actually a full-fledged story. Now, there's many different ways you can go about doing this. There's lots of videos you can watch. But if I was to give you some advice, and one of the things that I tend to do myself, I begin by asking what I consider to be the most important question for any storyteller to ask themselves. Why? The idea, that thing that you have in your mind, or it could be multiple things, but whatever it is that has triggered this desire, this urge in you to tell this story, ask yourself why. So this basically means you interrogate the idea, okay? So if it is a plot line, okay, if you've got an idea for a specific type of story, ask yourself, why is that idea meaningful to you, and why would it be meaningful to others? Okay, that is where I personally would begin. And some of you might be like, well, why begin there? Why not just start writing a story or something like that? You can do that. But I think, in my personal opinion, it's a lot better to begin with a stronger understanding of your vision and of why you're making something. You already have the ideas. You don't need me or anyone on YouTube or in any book or any podcast to give you the ideas per se. Most of you will have the idea already, right? The problem is getting it out or doing something with it. And what I'm saying is that what I've often found is asking yourself why that idea matters to you can help you to better understand what to do with it. Because you're not just going to stop with that one idea, are you? But you're going to have this specific idea. But what do these ideas tend to do? They tend to branch off, right? They tend to spiral into other things. So now you begin with this one scene, and now you've got a side character. Now you've got a romantic interest. Now you've got the plot taking shape, right? And all of these things start to come together and coalesce the more thought you put into it. But I found the fastest way and the most effective way of going through that process when you're starting out is asking why. If you interrogate every single one of these sort of building blocks, every single one of these ideas that you have as you have them, you'll be a lot more likely to actually make the ideas stronger. When you start asking the question of why you should use these ideas or why you should implement this into your story, you also are more likely to come to a conclusion that helps you to understand the meaning of those things. So, for example, right, when I was coming up with my very first story, one of the things that I wanted to do was I knew I wanted the story to have a protagonist that had white hair. Why? Because a lot of times you would have like the kind of Mary Sue type of characters. This isn't so much of an issue nowadays because people critiqued it so heavily. But at the time when I was making my story in the mid 2010s, right, 2015 or whatever, you had a lot of people who would make these characters that were like, had the silver hair, the white hair, purple eyes, these ridiculous types of characters. And people would meme on them. But they would be made in a lot of stories unironically. And, they were usually the chosen one. And the chosen one character is always so special. Now, I kind of thought, well, it'd be funny to take that look and to give it to a character unironically as well. But now I have to ask myself why, both in terms of in the actual story, but also in a meta sense. Like, in terms of what this story represents in the real world, why do I, as the author, want to have a character that looks like that? Okay, and like I said, it was just because I kind of wanted to sort of poke some fun at that type of character existing within literature. But the other reason in world was because this character was born as the chosen one, and but what does that mean? Okay, they're the chosen one. Why is this specific girl the chosen one? Why is that important in this world? Not in someone else's story, not in another story that you've seen, in my story. Why in my story does being the chosen one matter? How does that affect her relationships with the world and with herself? How does she feel about the fact that she's got white hair? How does the world feel about this? Does it matter? And if it doesn't matter, why doesn't it matter? If it does matter, why does it matter? And you start to see where you can easily, as you want to answer that question, you're going to start naturally world building. But the best part about it is you're not just going to be world building, you're going to be world building with meaning. So now you're doing the job of actually building and fleshing out your world, which is what you want to do, right? You want to flesh out your world, especially if you're writing speculative fiction, fantasy, sci-fi. You want to flesh out your world, but you're going to be fleshing out the world with meaning and intent baked into it. Okay. Again, this is just my personal thing of what I tend to do. You don't have to do exactly what I'm saying. But if I was going to give advice to someone on how to begin a story and how to best go about expanding on it, building the characters, building the setting, building the narrative, I would say whatever ideas you begin with, because you will begin with some ideas. Right now, as you're watching this, that story that you've come up with, if you haven't already written it, if you're in the beginning stages of it, there's ideas you have. There's certain things that you're thinking about and you're like, I know I want to have this and this and this. I just don't know how I'm going to make them all come together. I just don't know, how I'm going to make it work. And I would often say the answer is to ask yourself why to all those things. Interrogate them, interrogate them, interrogate them. Why? For me, a big part of the reason why I often say that I think this should be at the beginning, because you could argue, well, couldn't you just figure this out in the middle of the story or towards the end, or couldn't you just discovery write out your first draft or whatever and then kind of come back to it later? Of course you can. You can always do that. I just think, and this is just maybe just my personal style of storytelling, but I'm very big on meaning, because I personally think that when it comes to the stories that stay with us the most and the ones that tend to stand the test of time, I do think meaning is a massive, massive component in achieving that. Whether it's meaning that you come up with for your story, or whether it's meaning that other people apply to certain parts of your story, I do think meaning is a massive driving force behind why people find stories to matter and to, well, have meaning to them. So the reason why I specifically advise for you to go in with this mindset from the beginning is because then you are building from the foundation of your story with meaning in mind. You're not just saying, oh, I want to have this cool character that has the ability to bend fire, or I have this character that has the ability to teleport across continents. You're asking why, and not just the why in terms of why you as the author want it, but why it matters for the story. Why would the reader want to actually see that, or whoever your audience may be? Why in your world does that power exist? And why does that power have meaning? How do other people react to it? How do they see it? How does the protagonist or the character that is utilizing it, how do they see it? Why? So if you question everything and if you kind of go down the path of asking why all the time, then I think you're going to create a lot more story elements that you yourself understand better, which makes it easier for you to actually sit down and create the story and actually complete it. But also it makes it easier for you to explain it to others and to make it make sense both within the story and outside of it. So obviously that's just my opinion on it. Maybe that's a slightly unconventional take as to how you begin stories. A lot of times people will give you a lot of advice that's like really technique specific. I've never really been a big fan of doing that because I think there's lots of different techniques that people can use. And whilst it can be helpful, what's the point in me coming on YouTube and adding my voice to things if I'm just going to say the same thing everyone said 1,000 times, right? Like, I would much prefer to kind of give you guys more advice that's to do with the mindset and also to do with things that I think can kind of be more powerful. So anyway, I would appreciate if you guys found that helpful, for you to leave a like. Again, share your thoughts, any techniques or ideas you have in the comments below. And of course, if you would like to see more videos similar to this one, you already know what to do. Okay, I appreciate all of you for watching this video and any of my other videos, and I appreciate any of you that choose to stick around and subscribe. And I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.